Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Bolden Sports Media NFL podcast. And we are coming to you on a Monday, the Monday where I believe the vast majority, if not all, of the teams are reporting back for the start of training camp and what is, in many people's eyes, the real start of pre-season. Because whilst you have the mini camps and the OTAs and everything, it is now nothing but football. You roll in from training camp, and then in just a couple of weeks you got the first pre-season games, and then you go into the regular season. So really, in most people's eyes, this is the start of the 2024 NFL season. And we are going to be talking about training camp in just a little bit. But before we do, I need to start off by doing the admin for the show, which I do at the start of every week. So, as I always do, thank you very much for joining us. If you are new, don't forget you can like and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this on. And don't forget that you can subscribe to us on social media. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. And as I always like to do, if you are a returning listener, thank you very much for returning and making us a part of your week. And if you were wondering if we were going to touch on the political issues of the day, like we sort of did last week, don't worry, we are just going to brush right by that. I think that was probably as much politics as I can handle on the show, at least for right now. When November starts to roll around, maybe that can be the final non-football story of the week. But for right now, I just want to get right onto it, and get right onto it we shall. And as I said, we are going to be talking about training camp, and this this isn't really just one story or one thing that caught my mind. Well, this idea was sparked off by one video, and that's really what I want to touch on. And it was a video of Patrick Mahomes working out with his new wide receiver, Xavier Worthy, who was the first round draft pick for the Kansas City Chiefs this year. And everyone sort of looking very impressed. As you know, Patrick Mahomes, if you've seen the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, Patrick Mahomes sort of takes a snap, rolls out to his left, and then fires, your typical Patrick Mahomes pass to Xavier Worthy, who makes the completion. And I'm seeing a lot of people use that as a basis for, oh, Patrick Mahomes, he's back, he's not messing about. Oh, isn't this, this wide receiver quarterback duo is going to be extravagant, and all that sort of hyperbole that you get around training camp. And it's that hyperbole that I sort of want to talk about. Now, I say this purely because I don't think I would be having this conversation if I wasn't burned last year by the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they were able to do in preseason. Now, for those of you who are not Steelers fans who may have missed the headline for it, but the Steelers were the winners of the preseason in the NFL. We won all of our games, and in the 5 drives that Kenny Pickett took across the 3 games, we scored 5 touchdowns. To which everyone said, or at least everyone in Steelers universe was feeling pretty happy about it. Like there was the downside, the dampener of, oh, it is just preseason. But when it is your first team, the first teamers making these plays, even if the defense isn't exactly stellar, or there may have been 1 or 2 players not playing, it's always going to be hard for you not to completely keep the two separate, as it were. And now, as I look at these videos, and again, Mahomes' video was just one that got me, but I'm sure there will be many others. That I think I just need to use this as a public service announcement, shall we say, to warn NFL fans not to get too bought into the hype when it comes to preseason, because you are only setting yourself up to be either disappointed, whatever your expectations are, you are setting yourselves up to be wrong either way. Yeah, if you look at video, I think there was one of Caleb Williams. I believe it was Caleb Williams, but it could be any quarterback. A couple of months ago, where they were throwing passes and they were not being completed, and everyone will say, "Oh, that means they're a fraud, or the quarterback is a bust, or whatever." So words along those lines. And then there will also be the times like the Patrick Mahomes video where it will be looked at and say, "Oh, look, Patrick Mahomes, it's great. Oh, we have the next Joe Montana and Jerry Rice duo," sort of thing. So you are setting yourselves at either end of the spectrum, either, oh, this is really great, or oh, this is really bad. When the truth is, it's always likely going to be somewhere in the middle. So, as I said, this is a public service announcement. When it comes to training camp and the footage that comes out of it, and to an extent, some of the stories that come out of it as well, always take it with a pinch of salt. Again, I wanted to say that to myself last year with the Steelers, and I got burned. So much so that I think I had five when I came to do my fantasy football. I believe I had five Pittsburgh Steelers drafted. I had Pickett, Harris, yeah, Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, George Pickens, and Pat Frymouth. I had them all because I bought into the hype and I got burned, and I got burned for it. So that's just that's my exemplum to say to all of you: when you see stuff that comes through, don't take it for what it is. Patrick Mahomes is doing this against the Kansas City Chiefs defensive backs, for instance, with his pass to Xavier Worthy. He's going to come up against worse defenses than that. He's also going to come up against better defenses than that are going to be playing at full speed. So just because he completes a Hail Mary and Xavier Worthy pulls off a nice route or whatever against the Chiefs, second string cornerback, say, do not automatically assume that he's going to have, the Mahomes is going to have the same time against an active pass rush from, who's got the best defensive line that they're likely going to face this year. Let's go with the 49ers. They have to play the 49ers this year in a Super Bowl rematch. So don't always assume it's going to be, that big. And again, if Xavier Worthy is running that route against, Patrick Surtain, he's got to go against the Broncos this season. Don't automatically assume that he's going to be able to get away with that. Or when they play the Ravens, it's not going to be picked off by a roving Kyle Hamilton in the defensive backfield or whatever. So don't get too excited about your team's performances and videos that come out in training camp. But at the same time, if something does get leaked by a reporter where, you know, say someone has a bad day, I'm just going to pick a random team here. The Tennessee Titans and Will Levis say he has a bad day where he throws three interceptions in a row in goal line, 7-on-7 drills. Don't automatically assume that, oh, what we saw last year was a fluke and he's not going to be anything. So just temper your expectations and don't get too sucked into the hype either way when it comes to training camp, because the proof will automatically count during the regular season. And again, I know for some of you this may be, the obvious takeaway when it comes to training camp, but after last year, I just feel like I have to get it off my chest and just warn anyone who might not be totally 100% convinced and falling in line with that line of thinking. So, as I say, just a warning: when it comes to training camp, don't get too excited, don't get too downhearted. But that's not to say that you should totally ignore what happens at training camp. And one of the big stories that has caught my eye, and this is going to be our second story of the day, is the news concerning Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love and the fact that he, again, in not a rare move, this isn't the first time it has happened, nor is it going to be the last time that it happens, but Jordan Love is not going to be practicing without a new contract from the Green Bay Packers. Now, Jordan Love is, or rather has been, in a rather weird situation when it comes to the Packers and his contract, rather, because of when he was drafted and how it played out and how much or little playing time he managed to get over the years waiting behind Aaron Rodgers. It was sort of weird because last year he was eligible for his fifth year option to be picked up, but it wasn't, and instead they gave him a 1 year extension on the end of his current contract, which, in a sense is having your fifth year option picked up, but just not in the official way, as it were. And obviously various contract structures and whatever sorted out. And at the time, I sort of was a bit confused by it, but more as it sort of worked out, it kind of, yeah, that's probably the right way to do it, based on this, that was going to be his the final year of his rookie contract was last year. Maybe they wanted to have an extra time or work their way around how they wanted to pay him so they could have him for this upcoming year, but this is going to be the final year of his contract, and as I mentioned earlier, as is unsurprising, he's not going to be practicing without a new one. Now, when it comes to the Green Bay Packers and how they handle this, they need to be ultra careful with how they deal with you know, making sure they do not annoy Jordan Love through all of this. Because, and I want to make the comparison to Dak Prescott with the Dallas Cowboys, as I tend to do, just because it's the Dallas Cowboys and they are one of the most notorious teams in the league. But the way the Dallas Cowboys are handling this situation with Dak Prescott, they are running the risk, and many a couple of reports out there are sort of suggesting it's going this way, that they are going to annoy Dak Prescott and then he's going to walk at the end of the season. If that happens for the Green Bay Packers, it's a slightly different situation because whilst Dak Prescott has done enough to earn the franchise status, and he was a sixth round draft pick and has had to work his way up. Given the circumstances in which Jordan Love was drafted, it's not quite as easy as that because this is the guy that they put the future of the franchise on from day one. Dak Prescott got lucky to be the franchise quarterback. He was sixth round. He was going to be, developing behind Tony Romo for a couple of years. Maybe if things had worked out in certain ways, maybe he just would have been a career backup in the NFL. But Romo gets injured, Dak Prescott moves on, and we know the story from there. But if the Green Bay Packers put Jordan Love in a situation where he says, "No, you're not giving me enough money," or he's not happy with the contract situation, and he walks, that's not going to go down well with the Green Bay Packers fans because Jordan Love showed last year that the wait was worth it when it came to, the situation with Aaron Rodgers and being the heir apparent. And now, after all those years of Hall of Fame level quarterback, going back to Brett Favre in the mid 90s, from the mid 90s to 2000 and then, well, the 2022 season, the Green Bay Packers have had Hall of Fame caliber quarterback play. So there's a certain level of expectation and certain level of standards that need to be kept with Jordan Love. And off this first year, I'm not saying he's automatically Hall of Famer, but you could see the potential is there for him to at least. It's not a major drop off from that level of play. But if they were to let him walk in one way or another at the end of this year, that has set the whole thing back years because it then makes the pick they first used on him to be a total waste if you're going to spend a first round pick and then through your own fault. It's not as if there were injuries that scuppered a potential great career like Carson Wentz, for instance, with the Philadelphia Eagles. This was your own making. That first round pick, that was just a bust. That was a waste if you're only going to get one, and then this second year out of him. And if it doesn't result in the Super Bowl, which I think is still a bit too far ahead of the Packers, still a step away from the Packers, if that doesn't happen, then the whole thing is a waste, and you have effectively wasted all these years. Because fine, if you're going to have the success that similar to Aaron Rodgers, yes, you used the first round pick with him, then he sat developed, and that gave you that. For you, that was worth it. But if you then let Jordan Love go after 2 years of being a starter, then that is a total waste. And you should have gone, get something to make Aaron Rodgers be happy and better, be that, an extra offensive lineman or thing he was always crying out for, but never seemed to get was an extra weapon. So if you didn't do that, then what was the point in drafting Jordan Love in the first place? So the Green Bay Packers need to pay Jordan Love, and they need to pay him well because, as I say, there is the potential for this to go completely south. And it's not just going south, it's going way south. And effectively having to start the whole project over again. You may not get everything you want from Jordan Love in terms of, maybe he wants a longer term deal and you're only, still in, and the Packers are still in the, well, you've still got something to prove stage. So they'll offer, a 3 year extension where Jordan Love would want 5, say. You'll probably get some negotiation out of that. But there is no way that you can let Jordan Love you cannot lowball Jordan Love and let him walk because otherwise, as I said, you are setting the whole thing back, 5, maybe even 10 years, depending on how things go. It is just not worth doing for what Jordan Love at least looks like he has the potential to do. So if I'm the Green Bay Packers, I am making sure that I get that contract sorted and more importantly, get it signed as soon as possible because it's the thing I've always sort of said. The more reps that you can get and the more work you get in training camp, the better you are going to be. And the Green Bay Packers showed last year that they are a team with potential. But let's see if we can at least get that extra couple of percentage points out of this team to give them the best shot of having some sort of success this season. And sticking with quarterbacks and sticking with contracts and sticking with the NFC North, one story that did catch my attention was a rather interesting one. It concerned Caleb Williams, the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, and what he wanted. And part of the reason why it took so long for his rookie deal to be signed was because he wanted a rather interesting clause to be inserted into it. Now, according to various reports, this that I got it from Mike Florio to start with, but apparently Caleb Williams in his in his negotiation with the Bears wanted there to be a clause in there that they could not franchise tag him upon the expiration of his contract. Now, when it comes to Caleb Williams, there has always sort of been an argument around him that he's got a certain level of leverage when it comes to his career in the NFL. Starting back a couple of years ago, when it was presumed he was going to be the number one draft pick, and again, Mike Florio was the one who brought it up the most. I'm sure other people did, but he was the one that, at least in my eyes, mentioned it most prominently. There was a chance that Caleb Williams, I think it was around the time the Arizona Cardinals were looking as if they might be the number one pick, and there was still a chance they could move on from Kyler Murray and all sort of arguments along those lines. There was the argument that said Caleb Williams could just refuse to be, he could stay in college for another year, say, I do not want to be drafted by, a bad organization, and just, use his leverage to say, I'm getting this money from NIL when I'm at USC. I'm just gonna stay right here. And, maybe that there was a chance that he could say no, no, in all the draft class, he could say, no, I do not want to be drafted by you. And again, the Chicago Bears are a prime example of a team that you could say that about, because you go through their history, they have not had good quarterback play. It's the name I always bring up, but Sid Luckman is the last good, no, yeah, reasonably good quarterback that they have had. Even going back to the Super Bowl days, Jim McMahon. He wasn't really the driving force behind that team, and you know all the way through. At least during my lifetime, the best quarterback that the Bears have had is Jay Cutler, and that's not saying much, really. So the Bears are not a team that has a good quarterback. Caleb Williams could say, "I do not trust this franchise to develop me in such a way, so I'm gonna, I'm just not. I refuse to be drafted by. I'm going to refuse to play." So he's always had a level of leverage, especially given the talent that he is, supposedly bringing to the league. But this one is sort of the latest iteration of that, with him saying, or at least maybe sort of succumbing to it, fine, you have my rights, I'm going to play for you, but you can only hold me here. He's basically asking to be held here for the minimum time possible. The end of his rookie contract, then there may be the fifth-year option that goes after that, and then it would be franchise tags. And that I see this as a way. Again, this is just my opinion. That is him saying, again, fine, I'm here, but I don't want to be here. I will fulfill my contract, but then that's it, because I feel I've got talent to go elsewhere, and you know, I don't want to be held up and have my career further stunted by playing in Chicago. Now, as Mike Florio sort of mentions in his initial report about it, there have been a couple of players who have managed to secure such a commitment. As he says, Dak Prescott was one of them. But when it comes to Caleb Williams, and given his status, or believed status, that he's going to be in the NFL, it's on a slightly different level. And to ask for this basically before you have even played a snap in the NFL, it's something different when you can get into a contract further down the line of, okay, yes, when you've established yourself as a great player, and you can say, right, I'm going to sign this next big contract, but if things tend to go south, or I don't feel like this is the way that, or a team that I feel like I can win a Super Bowl with, I'm going to take my talents elsewhere. Then you can say, right, you cannot franchise tag me, and I'll just go onto the free agent market. But to do this, before he's played his rookie season, I think I don't know whether or not that's a level of confidence or a level of arrogance. And I know there's a slightly thin line between the two. But I think that's going to be interesting to see how this plays out further down the line because, again, the way I interpret that, that is Caleb Williams saying, I do not trust you to look after my best interest in the long run. So, how is something like that going to play out when he goes for his next contract negotiation? If if the Bears come back at him and say, "Well, do you really want to be here?" Does that mean they're going to have to be forced to pay more money to entice him to stay, or does that mean that they're just going to go into all negotiations and say, "Look, we know we're not going to be able to keep you. You don't want to be here. We'll just let you go." So it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. Again, not in the immediate future. This is probably going to have to be something to be kept in the archives, restore, and come back to it in about 4 or 5 years when, maybe even 3 years, depending on how things go, when Caleb Williams is next up for another contract, because this is going to be something very, very important, and it could very well change the face the the course of the Chicago Bears as a franchise, and maybe even Caleb Williams as a quarterback in the NFL. Because again, what happens if this is a problem for, again, should he move on from the Chicago Bears? What happens if that comes up to who he goes to sign for in free agency? Again, the element of, right, maybe the executives say, no, you're having too much control, you haven't deserved this yet, so we're going to take that into account when we come to discuss negotiations and contracts. So just keep this in mind. Again, not right now, but 4 or 5 years down the line, this can become very, very important. And our final NFL story of the day before we move on to our non-football story, that we wrap things up. The news that emerged over the weekend that Shaq Barrett is going to be retiring. It certainly took me by surprise. I'm pretty sure it took the Miami Dolphins by surprise. Now, I just want to stress I'm not sort of like blaming Shaquille Barrett, or I'm going to get angry at him for retiring at this point of at this point of preseason, right before training camp. He did say that he wanted to use his time to spend time with his family and his kids and whatever. Maybe there's something that's gone on behind the scenes that sort of changed his thinking. Maybe there's a family emergency, or something has changed that has changed his mindset, and he's decided to want to be close to family. I'm not going to get angry at him for that. At the end of the day, it's his family. I'm not gonna. I can't blame a player for wanting to do that. Um, but yeah, he's retired from the NFL, and if I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, I'm gonna be slightly not annoyed. Again, I think a lot of people can respect the fact that he wants to spend time with his family, but slightly worried with what the potential or what the loss of Shaq Barrett is going to do for the Miami Dolphins this season. Because, as I've said, the Miami Dolphins need that level of toughness about them, because we've seen that, what is the stat? I think it's now 0-10. Once the game is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, that they struggle or go on the road during December and in the playoffs. So they can be as great as they want in the regular season, but once it gets to the important part of the year, they freeze up. That's a bad pun, but it's about the best one I could think of at the moment. So they need to have that little bit of grit and physicality to them. And if the offense isn't going to provide it, then that might have to come through the defense. And Shaq Barrett, if you look at his stats last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he played in 16 games, 4.5 sacks, 52 tackles, 3 of which were for loss, 3 forced fumbles. That's a pretty good player for the Miami Dolphins to be adding, and someone who I think they probably would have been feeling very confident about adding to their defense this year. But now that's a major part of the defense gone. That potential defense gone. So they're going to have a very, very hard time coming to replace that. And again, given the AFC East, I think, as I said last week, there is that significant chance that the Buffalo Bills, the New York Jets, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and everyone else stays healthy, and the Miami Dolphins, that could very well be a three-way fight for the division at the end of the season. It could come down to 1 or 2 games towards the end, and a player like Shaq Barrett could be someone that could have made a difference for them. So just a little bit of worry if I'm the Miami Dolphins for losing what again is a pretty important and integral part of that defense. And it's going to be a case come the end of the season if they don't go as far as they could or perhaps should, and maybe the defense is one of the problems. A bit like when everyone pointed out the Green Bay Packers defense was a problem when they Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I think it's when they lost to the San Francisco 49ers in a playoff game, and they gave up like 200 yards after contact or whatever. And everyone could point out and say, right, clearly that's the problem. You need to address the linebacking situation. Imagine if it's the same for the Miami Dolphins. They're going to look back, and again, don't get angry over Shaq Barrett for this, but just a little bit disappointed that he left them at this time of the season when, options to replace them are going to be somewhat limited, and whoever they do get in, is he going to be able to produce at the same level to replace him? And then is he going to be able to learn the system and whatever in enough time? So slightly worrying, but at the same time, don't get too angry for the reason why he left. And with that, we move on to the final subject, and going from someone at the end of the career, literal end of their career in Shaq Barrett, to someone very much at the start of their career. Now, I don't know if you saw this story coming out of the MLS in the past couple of days, but the Philadelphia Union decided to play a 14-year-old in a professional game against the New England Revolution. Now, I don't want to get too overthink. Yeah, it was in the last few minutes of the game. They were already well away, well in the lead. So it wasn't like this was thrown on as a desperation attempt to, oh, look how desperate they are. They're turning to a 14-year-old to try and win the game. They were way ahead in the game, and they just threw him on in the past couple of minutes. But I just wonder, how was that really the right thing for them to do? Now, in the way I was growing up, I was always led to believe that 16 was the rough, no, for soccer at least. 16 was the right age for someone to start playing against men's team. If they were good enough, they were old enough. You've seen 16-year-old prodigies, come through and shine over the years. And if they're physically built to a certain level and they can handle the physicality, fine. I sort of get that. But for a 14-year-old, I just think that might be going a little bit too far. Now, I understand he isn't the first 14-year-old to ever play in a professional game. For those of you who may have perhaps taken a slight interest in soccer about 15 years ago would know the name Freddie Adu and how he was meant to be the next wonder kid for American soccer and, the future of the sport and someone who could help take the US men's team to the next level and all that sort of thing. I know he played when he was 14, but there's just something about putting a kid that young into a professional environment that just does not sit totally right with me. Again, I'm not saying anything about like his talent level. I'm sure there may be. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to be there if he's playing well for the reserve team and the academy side and the youth side with Philadelphia. Then by all means go for it. But just at an age, I just don't. There's just something that just doesn't sit right with me about that. Sorry to end it on a downer, but that's just my thoughts. But that is the end of the show. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. As I said at the top of the show, if you're new, then thank you for joining us for the first time. Don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, and also on our social medias, which is again on Twitter we are at MRB Sports Media, and on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube we are at Baldwin Sports Media. And for those of you who are regulars, thank you once again for making us a part of your week. That is all we have time for today. We are coming to the end of the half-hour time slot. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll be back with, as I touched on at the start of the show, hopefully no hyperbole or over-exaggerations from training camp, but hopefully some little tidbits that we can dive into and discuss. But until next time, and until I speak to you next, take care.